What's up YouTube, it's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another video. I was going to do my NBA preview today, but obviously Carmelo Anthony just got traded, so let's just get right into it and I'll get back to my NBA preview tomorrow. So for people out there who are unaware, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows about this now, Carmelo Anthony finally gets traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So a lot of new faces on a new team. I really don't know how well it's going to mesh, but definitely I can see some problems with the chemistry, especially because there's a lot of ball dominant players on this team. But with that being said, that actually wasn't my first initial thoughts. My first thoughts on this transaction was, I guess Doug McDermott, Enes Kanter, and a second round pick is more valuable than players such as Kevin Love, Ryan Anderson, and Evan Turner, because that's all New York received through this transaction. My second initial thoughts were, OKC and their bench definitely got decimated through this transaction. However, I'm somewhat wrong, especially because they turned around and they signed Trey Brooks to the organization, which is ridiculous because the amount of money that they're spending is getting out of hand, but I'll touch upon that later. First, let's actually look at the lineup itself, because I'm starting to notice a lot of people haven't taken the time out to do so. So when it comes to this lineup, I'm assuming, because obviously things could change, but Russell Westbrook starting at the point guard position, obviously Paul George at the 2, Carmelo Anthony at the 3, Patrick Patterson at the 4, and Steven Adams at the 5. Now, one big thing I really like about this lineup, and I know a lot of people are going to point this out, that possibly Carmelo Anthony is going to be playing at the 4, and then you got Paul George at the 3, and Roberson is going to be in the starting lineup. Now, don't get me wrong, it's definitely a possibility, and actually that's the biggest reason why I like this lineup and this team now, because of the flexibility that they display. If they want to go small ball or have a more dynamic scorer at the power forward position, they can definitely move Carmelo Anthony down at the power forward spot, give some slower forwards some problems on the offensive end, and then move Paul George to the 3 and Andre Roberson up at the 2. So I do like the lineup itself. And then if you want to go even smaller and match up with the Golden State Warriors death lineup, you can have Trey Burke at the 1, Russell Westbrook at the 2, Paul George at the 3, at the 4, Andre Roberson or maybe Paul George at the 4, but then Carmelo at the 5. And this right here definitely is something I would hope we see a little bit of, especially if Trey Burke can kind of hang out there with some of the other starters and knock down the shots, because that's really all they really need him to do when they're in the lineup with Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Carmelo Anthony. But again, the biggest reason why I like this lineup is because of its flexibility. Having other players around Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, and Westbrook, such as Patrick Patterson, Steven Adams, Roberson, Trey Burke, Felton, I like this lineup really well. Also, we have certain players such as Grant, Abrinas. I honestly believe this is going to be a very, very well-ran lineup, especially if you can have some better lineups and rotations that we saw last year from OKC, because Billy Donovan definitely was kind of suspect in that area. But the last thing that I thought about, and probably the biggest thing I do want to talk about in this video, is how much pressure not only the individual players are under, but also the organization as a whole. I already talked about this when it comes to Russell Westbrook and Paul George, so I'll gloss over it real quickly. When it comes to Russell Westbrook, over the last couple of months now, especially since he's won the MVP award and averaged a triple-double, there's been this narrative that Russell Westbrook all his life had to struggle in the NBA. But for whatever reason, people have completely forgot about the fact that majority of his career he's played with Kevin Durant and Serge Ibaka. And then even when I bring up that, many people may make the argument that Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant may not have ever worked out with one another because he really didn't necessarily know who was the best player on the team. And with that being said, let me go ahead and clear the air. Kevin Durant was definitely the best player on the team when they were sharing the same roster with one another, so let's get that clear. And then you have many people make the argument that Russell Westbrook was young, he was dealing with injuries, blah, 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 blah. But at this point, all of those excuses are gone. Russell Westbrook is clearly the best player on this team. Russell Westbrook doesn't have to play that much defense because he's going to be surrounded with other defensive-minded players such as Paul George, Steven Adams, and Andre Roberson. He has floor spacing at almost every single position outside of the 5. And the biggest thing that I really had a problem with Russell Westbrook, last year should have been a year where Russell Westbrook as an individual was looking to get better, not necessarily looking for numbers. Transition to Paul George. not necessarily in the same dire situation, but Paul George is a player who may not be able to accumulate the amount of accolades and awards to add to his resume to put him in the Hall of Fame. As of right now, Paul George has been in the NBA for 7 seasons. However, he's only had 4 All-Star selections. More than likely, he's not going to be selected to be an All-Star this year because he's in the Western Conference. He's only had 3 All-NBA team selections along with 3 All-Defensive team selections. And more than likely, he might miss out on both of those this year as well because, again, he's in the Western Conference, and outside of winning at a pretty significant rate, especially in the Western Conference, you're not going to be able to receive the recognition that you more than likely deserve simply because there's so much competition in the Western Conference. It's easy to overlook you, especially because now Paul George went from being the guy to the second, possibly even the third option on a night-to-night basis. But then we get to Carmelo Anthony. See, Carmelo Anthony, very similar to Russell Westbrook and even Paul George, many people have made excuses for his lack of winning over the past couple of years. And quite honestly, I don't understand why people are so quick to come to his defense. Carmelo Anthony made the decision to stay in New York. I understand that financial reasons definitely were massive incentives for him to stay in his hometown, and I get that. However, when you're at a point where you can join an organization that has an established coach, an established culture, has a playing style that is proven to win even without an MVP candidate in Derrick Rose, yeah, you can take a pay cut, especially because LeBron took a pay cut, D-Wade took a pay cut, and Chris Bosh took a pay cut so they could win. But Carmelo Anthony did his own thing, and again, he's a grown man, so he can do that. But now we're at a situation where not only was he not winning in New York, but they weren't even making the playoffs. Now again, I hear the excuses already being typed in the comment section below, but now all of that stuff is out of the window. Carmelo Anthony is on a team where he has defensive-minded players. Carmelo Anthony is on a team where he has 2 other players that can give him 20 to 25, maybe even 30 points on a night-to-night basis. Carmelo Anthony is now on a team where he does not have to be the focal point of the offense. And all of this hoodie Melo or Carmelo Anthony playing like he's in the Olympics, all of that stuff, we should be able to see at least a glimpse of it on this team, because he should be more efficient, more effective on the defensive end, and I should be able to see the ball bounce around a little bit more, especially because, again, he has more offensive threats on his team. And then when it comes to OKC, this is the thing that really concerns me. Oklahoma City is an organization that's only been established for roughly 10 years now. So now when you have an organization that's fairly new into the league, it's in a small market, they basically need to do whatever they need to do to make sure they can stay relevant. And this is an organization not too long ago who made the decision, probably one of the worst decisions in not only franchise history, but more than likely in NBA history, especially within the last 20 years. They decided to depart from James Harden, trade him to Houston, and in return they received some assets that bounced around the league a little bit, and they received more assets, and they've been receiving a little bit of more assets here and there as James Harden has gone on to be an MVP candidate and one of the greatest scorers, facilitators, and just players that we've seen in the NBA within the last 5 to 7 years. Now again, I wasn't necessarily expecting James Harden to be that, especially if he was going to be playing under both Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. But if the excuse to why you decided not to keep James Harden was because of financial reasons, now that really doesn't make any sense, because the Oklahoma City Thunder are way over the salary cap and they're already dipping into their luxury tax as well. This is an organization that was trying to convince the rest of America that they knew what they were doing by letting James Harden go, because financially speaking, they didn't want to dip into their luxury tax and be repeat offenders and have to consistently pay a tax that was going to be ridiculous after James Harden's contract was going to expire. Newsflash to Oklahoma City general managers and owners, that's what you have to do to win championships. And so if you're telling me the reason why you didn't want to pay James Harden is because of financial reasons, but here we are now several years later and you lost players such as Reggie Jackson, Serge Ibaka, Enes Kanter, and Kevin Durant, who openly admitted that he was frustrated with the organization because of the situation that he was constantly put in, especially when it comes to coaching and lack of spacing. And the spacing was lacking simply because James Harden was no longer there anymore to provide the spacing for the organization. Well, why exactly are you spending so much money on a team that features Paul George and Carmelo Anthony with Russell Westbrook? Again, that's a fantastic lineup, but Paul George, he's not Kevin Durant. James Harden, in my opinion, back then is better than what Carmelo Anthony is right now. So what exactly was the point? It took you all of this time, losing all of that talent, to finally understand that you had to spend this amount of money to be competitive. And the thing that's even scarier about this is, again, this is an organization that's only been established for roughly 10 years. They're spending all this money trying to please these players, and none of them have committed yet. Paul George, expiring contract. Carmelo Anthony, expiring contract. And Russell Westbrook, the MVP, the player who sat there and averaged a triple-double, the player that you have been pacifying over the past 4 years, he hasn't signed his extension either. If this doesn't work out and all of them leave, then you have to start all the way over. And trust me when I say, because I'm a Laker fan, I'm looking at Orlando, I'm looking at Indiana, I'm looking at Chicago, I'm looking at how long it took Philly to rebuild. You're not going to run across an opportunity. Matter of fact, you couldn't even draft a team like that in 2K that had as much potential as a lineup that featured Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Serge Ibaka. But because you didn't want to pay a couple of extra $1 million because you didn't want to dip into your luxury tax, but here we are now several years later, and you're well over your luxury tax, so much so that more than likely if you keep this team that you have on your roster, you're going to be repeat offenders, and you're giving Steven Adams $20 million. Yeah, OKC, you better hope this works, because if it doesn't work, y'all gonna be stuck for a long time.